The dust swirled around Martha Thorne's boots as she stood on the porch of her small ranch house, watching the horizon with eyes that had long since dried of tears. At 26, folks in Copper Creek already called her Dust, not just for the layer of grit that seemed to coat everything she owned, but for what they reckoned was left of her life. Widowed before her 25th birthday, with nothing but a struggling ranch and memories to keep her company, Martha had heard the whispers. "Poor Dust," they'd say, her own kin included. Nothing left for her but to blow away. Martha pulled her shawl tighter as the autumn wind of 1875 cut through the New Mexico territory. Her husband Thomas had been dead 18 months now, taken by a fever that swept through like wildfire. The ranch they'd built together was failing, and the drought wasn't helping matters. She'd sold off most of the cattle already, keeping only enough to sustain herself. "Not much of a life," she muttered, pushing a strand of auburn hair back under her bonnet. Her green eyes, once bright with hope and laughter, now matched the faded color of the sage that dotted the landscape. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention. A lone rider approached from the east, silhouetted against the morning sun. Martha tensed. Visitors were rare and rarely brought good news. She straightened her back and waited, one hand resting near the rifle that was never far from reach. As the rider drew closer, she could make out a tall man on a chestnut stallion. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but even at a distance she could tell they were of good quality. The stranger pulled up about 20 feet from her porch and removed his hat. "Morning, madam," he called out, his voice deep and respectful. "Name's Isaac Zimmerman. I'm looking for the Thorne Ranch." "You found it?" Martha replied cautiously. "What's your business here?" Isaac Zimmerman dismounted with an easy grace that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. Up close, Martha could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with dark hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. His face was tanned and weathered, but handsome in a rugged way. "I heard you might be selling this place," he said, leading his horse closer. "I've been looking to settle in these parts." Martha's jaw tightened. "Who told you that?" "Folks in town. Said the widow Thorne might be ready to give up the ghost, so to speak." He seemed to realize his poor choice of words immediately. "Pardon me, madam. I meant no disrespect." "No, you're just repeating what everyone says," Martha said bitterly. "That I'm as good as dust." "Well, Mr. Zimmerman, I'm not selling. Not today." Isaac looked around the property, taking in the sagging fence posts, the empty corral, the weathered barn with its door hanging crooked on leather hinges. "Looks like you could use some help, whether you're selling or not." Martha bristled. "I don't need charity." "Wasn't offering any," he replied evenly. "I need work, and from the looks of things, you need hands. Could be a fair trade until I find my own spread." She studied him suspiciously. Men didn't offer to work for widows without wanting something in return. "Why would a man like you want to work for room and board when the silver mines are hiring?" "I've had my fill of digging holes in the ground," Isaac said, a shadow crossing his face. "Prefer open sky above me these days?" Something in his tone gave Martha pause. There was a story there, one that resonated with her own loss perhaps. Still, she hesitated. "1 week," she said finally. "You can stay 1 week. Help me mend the north fence line. After that, we'll see." Isaac nodded, a slight smile touching his lips. "Fair enough. Where should I put my horse?" "Barn's around back. There's an empty stall next to my mare. Tools are inside. You can take the room above the kitchen. It's small, but it's dry." As Isaac led his horse away, Martha wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. A stranger on her property, with no one around for miles. But something about Isaac Zimmerman's straightforward manner had disarmed her initial suspicion. Besides, she needed the help more than she cared to admit. That evening, Martha served a simple stew with the last of her garden vegetables. Isaac ate like a man who'd gone hungry before, appreciating every bite but taking care not to appear greedy. "This is good," he said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. "Haven't had a home-cooked meal in a while." "Where are you from, Mr. Zimmerman?" Martha asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "Originally, Ohio, but I've been moving west since the war ended. Spent some time in Colorado mining camps before heading this way." He took a sip of water. "And you? You're not from around here either, I'd wager." Martha smiled faintly. "Is my accent that obvious? I grew up in Virginia. Thomas, my husband, and I came out here 5 years ago. He had dreams of building something of our own, away from the memories of the war." "He succeeded," Isaac said, glancing around the modest but solid house. "This is good land." "It was," Martha corrected. "The creek's running low these days. Without water, nothing much thrives out here." Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "I noticed some old irrigation channels on the north side. Spanish work, probably. They knew how to move water in dry country." Martha looked up sharply. "What are you talking about?" "Stone channels. Mostly collapsed now. But they could be rebuilt. Might help capture what rain does fall. Direct it where you need it." "Thomas never mentioned any channels," Martha said doubtfully. "They're easy to miss if you're not looking for them. I spent time with a fellow in Arizona who studied such things. I could show you tomorrow." Martha didn't respond immediately. The thought that there might be something on her own land she didn't know about, something that could make a difference, both intrigued and disturbed her. "All right," she said finally. "Show me tomorrow." When Martha woke the next morning, she was surprised to find Isaac already up and working. From her window, she could see him in the barn, sorting through Thomas's old tools. The sight of a stranger handling her husband's belongings should have angered her, but instead, she felt an unexpected sense of relief. The tools had purpose again. After a quick breakfast, Isaac took Martha to the northern edge of her property, where the land rose slightly before meeting the foothills. She'd rarely come to this section, as it was rocky and unsuitable for grazing. "There," Isaac pointed to what looked like a random arrangement of stones. "See how they form a line? That's deliberate." Martha squinted. Now that he mentioned it, she could see a pattern, a shallow trench lined with flat stones, leading from a higher elevation down toward what had once been a small pond, now dried to cracking mud. "These channels captured rainwater from the hills," Isaac explained, kneeling to brush dirt from one of the stones. "When it rained in the mountains, even if it didn't rain here, water would flow down and be directed to where it was needed." "And you think we could rebuild this?" Martha asked, trying not to let hope creep into her voice. "It would take work," Isaac acknowledged. "But yes, the foundations are still here. With some effort, we could have it ready before the winter rains." Martha stared at the ancient stonework, thinking of the people who had lived and worked this land long before her. They had found a way to survive in this harsh country. Perhaps she could too. "Show me what needs to be done," she said finally. Over the next few days, Martha and Isaac worked side by side under the relentless sun, clearing debris from the old channels and resetting dislodged stones. The work was backbreaking, but for the first time since Thomas died, Martha felt a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival. Isaac proved to be a knowledgeable and patient teacher. He showed her how to select stones that would fit together, how to create small dams to slow the water's flow, how to direct the channels toward the fields that needed irrigation most. On the fourth day, as they worked together to move a particularly large stone into place, Martha slipped on loose gravel. Isaac caught her before she fell, his strong hands steady at her waist. For a moment they stood frozen, faces inches apart. Martha felt a flush rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the heat. "Thank you," she murmured, stepping back quickly. Isaac cleared his throat. "We should reinforce this section before we continue downstream," he said, as if nothing had happened. but Martha noticed he kept a careful distance between them for the rest of the day. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and purple, Martha broke the comfortable silence. "Why did you really come here, Isaac?" she asked softly. "There's better land to be had, easier places to start over." Isaac was quiet for so long Martha thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was low. "I was in Silverdale when it happened," he said. "The mine collapse." Martha's breath caught. Everyone in the territory had heard of the disaster at the Silverdale mine just over a year ago. Nearly 30 men lost, buried under tons of rock. "You were there?" she asked. Isaac nodded, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. "I was one of the lucky ones. Near the entrance when the supports gave way. Made it out with nothing worse than a broken arm and some scars." His hand unconsciously moved to his left side. "But I saw men I'd worked alongside for years just gone. In an instant." Martha understood then. "So you came looking for open sky. And land that doesn't hide death beneath its surface," Isaac added. "When I heard about this place, good water rights, just needed work, it seemed right." "Who told you about my ranch specifically?" Martha asked, curious. "Man named Patrick Thorne in Copper Creek. Said his cousin's widow might be willing to sell." Martha's lips tightened. "Patrick's been trying to get this land since Thomas died. He never approved of his cousin marrying a penniless Virginia girl in the first place." "He mentioned you might be heading back east soon," Isaac admitted. "Called you dust, said you were too fine for frontier life, bound to blow away eventually." "And what do you think?" Martha challenged, suddenly angry. "Am I just dust, Mr. Zimmerman? Something that doesn't belong here?" Isaac turned to look directly at her, his blue eyes intense in the fading light. "No, madam. From what I've seen, you're pure gold, the kind that gets stronger when tested by fire." Martha felt something shift inside her at his words, a wall beginning to crumble. It had been so long since anyone had seen value in her beyond being Thomas's widow. "The week's almost up," she said after a moment. "You planning to move on?" Isaac's gaze returned to the darkening landscape. "That depends. This place needs more work than can be done in a week. Or a month." He paused. "And I find I'm not in as much of a hurry as I thought." "I can't pay you properly," Martha warned. "Not until we get the ranch producing again." "I've got some savings from my mining days," Isaac said. "Enough to buy supplies, make improvements. If you're amenable, I'd propose a partnership. I contribute labor and capital. You contribute the land. We split whatever profits come." Martha considered his offer. A partnership with a man she barely knew was risky, but trying to save the ranch alone was likely impossible. "I'll need time to think about it," she said finally. "Take all the time you need," Isaac replied easily. "I'm not going anywhere just yet." The next morning, Martha rode into Copper Creek for supplies. She'd avoided town as much as possible since Thomas died, tired of the pitying looks and not-so-subtle suggestions that she'd be better off selling the ranch and finding another husband. But they needed provisions, and Martha wanted to speak with the bank about her outstanding loans. The general store fell silent when she entered, conversations halting mid-sentence. Martha ignored the stares and approached the counter where Harold Mills, the proprietor, was arranging tobacco tins. "Morning, Harold," she said briskly. "I need flour, coffee, nails, and some new work gloves if you have them." Harold raised his eyebrows. "Doing some repairs out at your place, Martha? Good to hear. Folks were starting to wonder if you'd let it go to ruin." Martha bit back a sharp retort. "Just the supplies, please." As Harold gathered her items, Martha noticed Evelyn Parker and Sarah Jenkins whispering behind their hands, occasionally glancing her way. Evelyn's husband Frank owned the largest ranch in the county, and she never missed an opportunity to remind Martha of her reduced circumstances. "Martha Thorne," Evelyn called out, her voice syrupy sweet. "We've hardly seen you in ages. How are you managing out there all alone?" "Just fine, thank you," Martha replied coolly. "Really? Because Patrick Thorne was saying just yesterday that the place is falling apart. Such a shame. After all Thomas's hard work." Martha turned to face the women directly. "Patrick Thorne doesn't know the first thing about what's happening at my ranch. And I'm not alone. I've hired help." This revelation caused both women's eyes to widen. "Hired help?" Sarah repeated. "Who would that be?" "Isaac Zimmerman," Martha said, enjoying their surprised expressions. "He's quite experienced in ranching and irrigation. We're making significant improvements." "Zimmerman?" Evelyn frowned. "I don't know any Zimmermans in these parts." "He's new to the area," Martha explained, turning back to the counter as Harold returned with her supplies. "A single woman, living alone with a strange man," Sarah murmured, just loud enough for Martha to hear. "What would Thomas say?" Martha's hands tightened around the package Harold handed her, but she kept her voice steady. "Thomas would be grateful someone is helping preserve what we built together. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." As Martha left the store, she heard Evelyn's parting shot. Poor Dust. Clinging to that worthless ranch when she could start fresh. Always was too stubborn for her own good. Martha's cheeks burned as she loaded her purchases onto her wagon. The encounter strengthened her resolve she would not be driven from her home by gossip and small-minded people. At the bank, things went somewhat better. Mr. Holloway, the manager, was skeptical when Martha explained her plans to revitalize the ranch, but grew more interested when she described the irrigation system they were rebuilding. "That's actually quite ingenious," he admitted. "If you could increase your water supply, you might be able to grow more than just subsistence crops." "That's the plan," Martha said. "With proper irrigation, we could plant orchards on the eastern slope. Apples do well in this climate." "We?" Mr. Holloway inquired, raising an eyebrow. Martha hesitated only briefly. "My new partner, Mr. Zimmerman, and I. He's investing capital and labor in exchange for a share of future profits." "I see." Mr. Holloway made a note in his ledger. "Well, if Mr. Zimmerman is willing to sign the loan papers as well, I might be able to extend your deadline by 6 months. Give you time to implement these improvements." "He'll sign," Martha said confidently, though she and Isaac had not yet finalized any formal arrangement. "I'll bring him in next week." As Martha drove the wagon back toward the ranch, her mind raced. She'd essentially committed to a partnership with Isaac without discussing terms. It was impulsive, perhaps even foolish, but something about Isaac Zimmerman made her believe in possibilities again. The sun was setting when Martha returned to find Isaac repairing the corral fence. He straightened when he saw her, wiping sweat from his brow. "Was beginning to worry," he said, coming to help unload the wagon. "Everything all right in town?" "As well as can be expected," Martha replied, handing him a heavy sack of flour. "I may have done something impulsive, though." Isaac waited, head tilted questioningly. "I told the bank you're my business partner," Martha admitted. "Mr. Holloway said he'd extend my loan if you'd co-sign." To her relief, Isaac smiled. "That so? Well, I suppose we'd better make it official then." "You're not angry?" Martha asked as they carried the supplies into the house. "Why would I be? It's what I proposed, isn't it?" Isaac set down the flour and turned to face her. "Unless you've reconsidered." Martha shook her head. "No, I think it's a good arrangement. For both of us." "Then it's settled." Isaac held out his hand. "Partners." Martha took his hand, feeling calluses that matched her own. "Partners." The handshake lingered a moment longer than necessary, and Martha found herself noticing details about Isaac she'd tried to ignore, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the small scar above his right eyebrow, the gentle strength in his hands. She pulled away first, busying herself with unpacking supplies. "I should start supper. I shot a rabbit while you were gone. Isaac said, seemingly unaware of her sudden discomfort. It's already dressed, hanging in the cool room. Thank you, Martha said, grateful for the change of subject. Rabbit stew sounds perfect. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a comfortable routine. Days were spent working on the irrigation channels or making repairs around the ranch. Evenings were for planning and quiet conversation on the porch. Martha found herself looking forward to those evenings more than she cared to admit. Isaac proved to be well-read and thoughtful, with opinions on everything from farming techniques to politics. He listened to Martha's ideas with genuine interest, never dismissing her suggestions as Thomas's cousins had often done. One evening, as they discussed plans for expanding the irrigation to the eastern fields, Martha realized she was smiling, really smiling for the first time in months. The sensation was so unexpected she stopped mid-sentence. "What is it?" Isaac asked, noticing her sudden silence. Martha shook her head, unable to explain the complex emotions swirling within her. "Nothing, just thinking about how much has changed in a short time." Isaac nodded, his expression growing serious. "Martha, there's something I should tell you about why I really came here." Martha felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "What do you mean?" "Patrick Thorne didn't just mention your ranch to me in passing," Isaac admitted. "He sought me out in Silver City, tried to hire me to persuade you to sell." Martha stared at him, stunned. "And you agreed?" "No," Isaac said firmly. "I didn't. But I was curious why he was so desperate to get this land. So I came to see for myself." "And what did you find?" Martha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A ranch with problems but potential. And a woman too stubborn to give up." Isaac's lips quirked in a half-smile. "Reminded me of myself." "Why tell me this now?" Martha demanded, anger beginning to replace shock. "Because we're partners now. Real partners. And I don't want secrets between us." Isaac leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Martha, I think Patrick Thorne knows something about this land that he's not telling. Something valuable." Martha frowned. "What could be valuable?" "The soil's decent but not exceptional. There's no evidence of minerals." "Water," Isaac said simply. "The old channels we're uncovering? They're more extensive than I first thought. I followed one of the branches today up into the foothills. There's a spring there, Martha. A good one, hidden in the rocks. With some work, we could bring that water down to the ranch year-round." Martha's mind raced. In this dry country, a reliable water source was worth more than gold. No wonder Patrick had been so persistent. "That changes everything," she breathed. "It does," Isaac agreed. "But only if we can get the irrigation system working before winter. And before Patrick figures out we've discovered the spring." Martha stood up, new determination flooding through her. "Then we'd better get to work." The following days were consumed with the monumental task of clearing and repairing the ancient channels. Martha wrote to a friend of Thomas's who lived in Santa Fe, an engineer who might have knowledge of Spanish irrigation systems. His reply came swiftly, along with sketches and technical advice that proved invaluable. Isaac, meanwhile, rode into Silver City and returned with 3 Mexican laborers who had experience with similar systems. With their help, the work progressed much faster. Pedro, the oldest of the workers, examined the channels with obvious respect. "My grandfather helped build such acequias near Taos," he told Martha. "This is good work, very old. The people who made this understood water." "Can it be fully restored?" Martha asked anxiously. Pedro nodded. "Sí, señora. With hard work, water will flow again." As October gave way to November, the days grew shorter and the nights colder. Martha and Isaac worked from dawn until dusk, stopping only when it became too dark to see. Their evenings were spent planning the next day's work, poring over maps and sketches by lamplight. They grew comfortable in each other's presence, the initial awkwardness giving way to an easy companionship that sometimes hinted at something deeper. Martha caught Isaac watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, his expression unreadable. And sometimes, when their hands accidentally touched over the maps, neither was quick to pull away. One evening, as they sat before the fire after a particularly exhausting day, Isaac broke their comfortable silence. "Why did you stay?" he asked. "After Thomas died. Most widows would have gone back to family." Martha stared into the flames, considering her answer. "I don't have family back east anymore. The war took my father and brother. My mother died before I married Thomas." "I'm sorry," Isaac said softly. Martha acknowledged his sympathy with a slight nod. "But it wasn't just that. This place, it was our dream. Thomas and I chose it together, built every structure with our own hands. Leaving would feel like abandoning him somehow. And now?" Isaac pressed gently. "Is it still just Thomas's dream you're fighting for?" Martha looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "No," she admitted. "Now it's mine too. I want to see this land thrive. I want to prove everyone wrong, the ones who called me dust, who said I'd blow away at the first sign of trouble." "You've already proven them wrong," Isaac said, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. "Whether the irrigation works or not, you've shown more grit than most men I know." Martha felt her cheeks warm at his praise. "We should get some rest," she said, rising from her chair. "Tomorrow's going to be another long day." As she turned to go, Isaac caught her hand. "Martha," he said, his voice low, "I'm glad I found you. And this place." For a heartbeat, Martha thought he might pull her closer, and part of her wanted him to. Instead, he released her hand with a gentle squeeze. "Good night, Isaac," she whispered, retreating to her bedroom with a strange ache in her chest that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. The next morning, Martha woke to the sound of unfamiliar voices. She dressed quickly and hurried outside to find Patrick Thorne and the sheriff standing in her yard, confronting Isaac. "What's going on?" she demanded, striding toward them. Patrick turned, his thin face twisted in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Cousin Martha, just having a chat with your employee." "Partner," Martha corrected firmly. "What are you doing on my property, Patrick?" Sheriff Miller, a heavy-set man with a drooping mustache, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mrs. Thorne, Mr. Thorne here has raised some concerns about, improprieties." Martha's eyes narrowed. "Improprieties?" "A unmarried woman living alone with a man," Patrick said, his tone dripping with false concern. "It's not proper, Martha. What would Thomas say?" "Thomas would say it's none of your damn business," Martha snapped. "Isaac is my business partner. We have a contract." "Do you now?" Patrick raised his eyebrows. "May we see this contract?" Martha hesitated. They had discussed terms but hadn't actually signed anything formal yet. "We're finalizing the paperwork next week at the bank," Isaac interjected smoothly. "Mr. Holloway is drawing up the documents." Sheriff Miller shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Well, that seems in order then." "Does it?" Patrick's voice hardened. "What about the fact that this man is using an assumed name? Did you know that, Martha? Your partner isn't who he claims to be." Martha looked at Isaac, who had gone very still. "What are you talking about, Patrick?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I made some inquiries," Patrick said smugly. "There was an Isaac Zimmerman at the Silverdale mine, all right. But he didn't walk away from the collapse. He died in it." A heavy silence fell over the yard. Martha felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. "Isaac?" she whispered, searching his face. Isaac's jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on Patrick. "My real name is Ian Zimmerman," he said finally. "Isaac was my twin brother." Martha stared at him, stunned. "Your brother?" Ian nodded grimly. We worked the mines together. When the collapse happened, I was outside. Isaac was inside. They never recovered his body. So you've been lying this whole time, Martha said, hurt and confusion washing over her. Not about anything that matters, Ian insisted, turning to her with pleading eyes. Everything I've told you about myself is true except the name. Why? Martha demanded. Why use your brother's name? Ian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration Martha had come to know well. After the collapse, I couldn't bear to be myself anymore. Isaac was the better man, more patient, more thoughtful. Taking his name was a way to honor him, to try to live as he would have. How convenient, Patrick sneered. And I suppose all those debts you left behind in Colorado have nothing to do with your new identity? Ian's head snapped up. What debts? The ones you ran from, Patrick said confidently. The gambling debts that got so bad you had to disappear. That's a lie, Ian growled. I never gambled. That was... He stopped abruptly. That was what? Martha prompted. Ian's shoulders sagged. That was Isaac's weakness, not mine. He had debts when he died. Yes. But I paid them. Every cent. Can you prove that? Sheriff Miller asked. I have receipts in my saddlebags, Ian said. I kept them in case anyone ever came looking. Patrick's confident expression faltered slightly. Even if that's true, the fact remains that he's been deceiving you, Martha. Using a dead man's name, worming his way into your confidence, your home. Enough, Patrick, Martha interrupted. I think I understand your concern now. You're worried that if the ranch succeeds, you won't get your hands on it. Patrick's face flushed dark red. That's absurd. I'm thinking of Thomas's legacy, of propriety. You're thinking of the water, Martha said flatly. You knew about the spring in the foothills, didn't you? That's why you've been so eager to buy this land. Sheriff Miller looked between them, confusion evident on his face. What spring? There's a substantial spring on the north edge of the property, Ian explained. With the irrigation system we're rebuilding, it could provide water for this entire valley. Very valuable in these parts. Understanding dawned on the sheriff's face. I see. This is ridiculous, Patrick blustered. I'm trying to protect you from a con man, Martha, and you're spinning tales about hidden springs. If you don't believe me, I'll show you, Martha offered the sheriff. We've cleared most of the channels already. The spring is about an hour's ride into the foothills. Sheriff Miller considered for a moment, then nodded. I'd like to see that, and Mr. Zimmerman's receipts. Zimmerman isn't even his real name, Patrick protested. No, Ian agreed calmly. But it's the name I've chosen, and I have documentation showing I legally changed it after my brother's death. Martha looked at him sharply. You said you took his name to honor him. I did, Ian confirmed, but I also made it legal. I didn't want there to be any question about my intentions. Martha wasn't sure what to believe anymore. The man she'd come to trust, perhaps even care for, had been keeping secrets from her, and yet, something about Patrick's accusations rang false. Sheriff, I'd like you to see the spring, she decided, and I want to see Ian's documentation. Then we can sort this all out properly. Sheriff Miller nodded. Seems reasonable to me. Patrick clearly wanted to object further but seemed to realize he was outnumbered. Fine. Let's see this miraculous spring of yours. The ride to the foothills was tense and mostly silent. Martha rode ahead with the sheriff, while Ian and Patrick followed several paces behind. Martha could feel Ian's eyes on her back, but she kept her gaze fixed forward, her thoughts in turmoil. When they reached the hidden spring, however, even Patrick couldn't hide his reaction. Water bubbled from between rocks, forming a clear pool before flowing down a natural channel that connected to the irrigation system they'd been restoring. Well, I'll be damned, Sheriff Miller breathed. That's a right proper spring. With the channels fully repaired, this water could irrigate the entire ranch, even in dry years, Martha explained. That's what we've been working on. Very impressive, the sheriff acknowledged. He turned to Patrick. Seems the widow Thorne isn't just dust after all, eh, Thorne? Patrick's expression was thunderous. A spring doesn't change the fact that she's living in sin with a man using a dead man's name. I changed my name legally, Ian said, pulling papers from his jacket and handing them to the sheriff. And here are the receipts for Isaac's debts. All paid in full. Sheriff Miller examined the documents carefully, then handed them to Martha. Everything appears to be in order, Mrs. Thorne. As for the living arrangements, well, that's between you and the Almighty, I suppose. Thank you, Sheriff, Martha said, relief washing over her. And now, if you don't mind, we have work to do. Patrick wasn't ready to concede. This isn't over, Martha. The town council won't stand for this scandal. The town council, Martha replied evenly, will be very interested to hear how you tried to cheat a widow out of valuable water rights. I wonder what Evelyn Parker will think of that, considering her husband's ranch could benefit from access to this water as well. Patrick's mouth opened and closed without sound, like a fish pulled from water. Good day, Patrick, Martha said firmly. Sheriff, thank you for your time. Once Patrick and the sheriff had ridden away, Martha turned to Ian, her expression unreadable. You should have told me. I know, Ian acknowledged. I wanted to, many times, especially after we became partners. Why didn't you? Martha asked, genuinely wanting to understand. Ian looked down at the spring, watching the water bubble from the earth. At first, it didn't seem important. You needed help. I needed work. Names didn't matter. He paused. Then, as we worked together, as I got to know you, I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid you'd look at me differently, Ian admitted, meeting her eyes. I didn't want to be Ian again, the twin who survived, who couldn't save his brother. With you, as Isaac, I found something I thought I'd lost forever. What was that? Martha asked softly. Purpose. Hope. Ian took a step closer. The chance to build something lasting. Something good. Martha wanted to stay angry, it would be safer that way, but she found she couldn't. She understood too well the desire to escape the past, to become someone new. No more secrets, she said finally. If we're going to be partners, real partners, I need to trust you completely. No more secrets, Ian agreed solemnly. I swear it. Martha nodded. Not quite ready to smile, but no longer feeling betrayed. We should get back. There's still daylight left, and that western channel won't clear itself. As they rode back to the ranch, side by side now, Martha felt something shift between them, a new honesty that was both frightening and freeing. The coming weeks brought both progress and challenges. Word spread quickly about the confrontation with Patrick and the discovery of the spring. Some townsfolk, led by Evelyn Parker, whispered disapproval of Martha's living arrangements. Others, particularly those who stood to benefit from increased water access, were suddenly much friendlier. Frank Parker himself rode out to the ranch one afternoon, ostensibly to see the irrigation system for himself. In reality, Martha suspected, he wanted to assess whether the water might eventually benefit his own vast holdings. Impressive work, he commented, as Martha and Ian showed him the channels they'd restored. Ancient technology put to modern use. The principles haven't changed, Ian explained. Water still flows downhill. The trick is controlling its path and speed. Frank nodded thoughtfully. And you believe this will provide enough water for your entire property? With proper management, yes, Martha said. And potentially enough to share with neighboring ranches for a reasonable fee, of course. Frank's eyebrows rose. Is that so? Well, Mrs. Thorne, it seems you're quite the businesswoman. I'm practical, Mr. Parker, Martha replied. This land will thrive better if the whole valley thrives, but resources have value, and I won't give them away. Frank studied her with new respect. My wife said you were just playing at ranching, waiting to give up and blow away like dust. Seems she misjudged you. Many people have, Martha said simply. After Frank left, Ian turned to Martha with a grin. You handled that perfectly. He'll be back with a proposal within the week. Martha allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. Probably, and we'll consider it, along with any others. We make a good team, Ian said, his expression growing more serious. We do, Martha agreed, finding she truly meant it. As they walked back to the house together, their hands brushed accidentally. This time, neither pulled away. Ian's fingers intertwined with hers, tentatively at first, then with gentle confidence when she didn't resist. Martha's heart beat faster at the simple contact. It had been so long since she'd allowed herself to feel this way, to imagine a future that included not just survival, but happiness. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, Ian broke their comfortable silence. I've been thinking about the orchard you mentioned, he said, for the eastern slope. What about it? Martha asked. We should plant it this spring, Ian said, his voice warm with enthusiasm. Apple trees take years to mature, but once they do, they'll produce for decades. It would be a legacy. A legacy, Martha repeated softly. She liked the sound of that something that would outlast her, growing and bearing fruit long after she was gone. The irrigation system will be finished before winter sets in, Ian continued. By spring, we'll be ready for planting. I know a man in California who specializes in apple varieties suited for higher elevations. He could advise us on the best types. Martha turned to look at him, struck by the way he spoke of their future, not just months ahead, but years. You're planning to stay then? For the long term? Ian met her gaze steadily. If you'll have me. The simple statement hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning beyond their business arrangement. And if I will? Martha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ian reached for her hand again, his touch warm in the cool evening air. Then I'd count myself the luckiest man in the territory. Martha looked down at their joined hands, then back to his face. In his eyes she saw not just desire, but respect, admiration, things she'd thought she might never experience again after Thomas died. It won't be easy, she warned. People will talk. Let them, Ian said simply. They've been calling you dust for so long, they can't see what's right in front of them. And what's that? Martha asked. Gold, Ian said, lifting her hand to his lips. Pure gold. The kiss he pressed to her knuckles was gentle, respectful, but it sent warmth spreading through Martha's entire body. I should turn in, she said, suddenly feeling overwhelmed by emotions she wasn't quite ready to name. Ian nodded, releasing her hand reluctantly. Good night, Martha. As winter approached, the work on the irrigation system grew more urgent. Martha and Ian, along with Pedro and the other workers, labored from dawn until dusk to finish before the first heavy snow. Their efforts were rewarded in late November when they diverted water from the spring into the completed channels for the first time. Martha stood beside Ian on a small rise, watching as water flowed down the ancient pathways they had restored, spreading life across land that had been parched for too long. It's beautiful, she breathed, eyes shining with unshed tears. It is, Ian agreed, though he was looking at her rather than the water. That evening they celebrated with a small feast. Pedro and the other workers had brought their families, and the house was filled with laughter and music for the first time in years. Martha found herself drawn into a dance by Pedro's wife Elena, who insisted on teaching her the steps to a lively Mexican folk dance. As Martha twirled somewhat clumsily, she caught Ian watching her, a smile playing at his lips. When the music changed to something slower, he approached, offering his hand. "May I?" he asked. Martha nodded, allowing him to lead her in a simple waltz. His hand was warm at her waist, his steps sure despite the crowded room. "Where did you learn to dance?" she asked, surprised by his skill. "My mother insisted both Isaac and I learn," Ian explained. "Said a man should know how to move with grace, not just strength." She was right, Martha said, enjoying the way they moved together in perfect rhythm. "She usually was," Ian agreed with a fond smile. "She would have liked you." "Would she?" Martha asked, unexpectedly touched by the thought. "Very much," Ian assured her. "She valued determination and kindness above all else. You have both in abundance." The dance ended too soon, and other couples filled the small space. But something had changed between Martha and Ian. A barrier had fallen, leaving possibility in its place. Later, after their guests had departed, they stood together on the porch, reluctant to end the evening despite the late hour. "Thank you," Martha said suddenly. "For what?" Ian asked, turning to face her. "For seeing value in this place when everyone else saw only failure. For believing in me when I'd almost stopped believing in myself." Ian shook his head. "I only saw what was always there. You're the one who never gave up, even when it would have been easier to walk away." Martha looked out at the ranch. Her ranch, seeing it now not as a burden, but as a promise. The moonlight silvered the newly irrigated fields, and in her mind's eye, she could already see the spring plantings, the summer growth, the fall harvest. "I never thought I could feel this way again," she admitted softly. "After Thomas died, I thought that part of me was gone forever." "What part?" Ian asked, his voice equally quiet. "The part that looks forward instead of back. The part that dreams." Martha turned to him, gathering her courage. "The part that loves." Ian's breath caught audibly. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he raised his hand to her cheek. "Martha." She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly at the tenderness of the gesture. When she opened them again, Ian's face was closer, his intention clear in his gaze. "May I?" he whispered, echoing his earlier request to dance. Martha's answer was to close the distance between them herself, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that began tentatively, but quickly deepened into something neither of them could deny. Ian's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, while Martha's hands found their way to his shoulders, then his hair. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing faster, eyes wide with the significance of what had just happened. "I should—" Martha began. "Stay," Ian interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. "Not. I don't mean. Just stay here, with me, a little longer." Martha nodded, allowing him to guide her to the porch swing. They sat together, Ian's arm around her shoulders, Martha's head resting against him, watching the stars wheel overhead. "What happens now?" Martha asked eventually. Ian's fingers traced patterns on her shoulder. "Whatever you want, Martha. There's no rush." But they both knew that wasn't entirely true. Winter was coming, and with it, decisions that couldn't be postponed indefinitely. "People will talk even more," Martha said. "They already talk," Ian pointed out. "Would it be so terrible to give them something worth talking about?" Martha laughed softly. "When you put it that way." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer before Martha reluctantly stood. "It's late. We should get some rest." Ian rose as well, taking her hands in his. "Martha, I want you to know that this isn't just gratitude or convenience for me. What I feel for you is real." "I know," Martha said simply. "It's real for me too." He kissed her again, more briefly this time, but with no less feeling. "Good night, Martha." "Good night, Ian." As winter settled over the valley, Martha and Ian fell into new routines. With the irrigation system complete, they turned their attention to planning for spring planting and continuing repairs on the ranch buildings. They worked as seamlessly as ever, but now there were stolen kisses in the barn, lingering touches as they passed tools, and quiet evenings by the fire that often ended with Martha curled in Ian's arms. They hadn't discussed marriage explicitly, but Martha knew it was on both their minds. The practical reasons were obvious: propriety, legal protection for their partnership, the ability to build a true future together. But more than that, Martha simply wanted to belong to Ian, and for him to belong to her, in every way possible. Christmas approached, bringing with it an invitation from Frank and Evelyn Parker to attend their annual holiday gathering. Martha was inclined to decline, but Ian convinced her otherwise. "We've nothing to hide or be ashamed of," he argued. "Besides, it's an opportunity to discuss water rights with several ranchers at once." So on Christmas Eve, Martha found herself dressed in her best gown, a deep green velvet that had rarely left its trunk since Thomas died preparing to face Copper Creek society for the first time as half of a couple. Ian, dressed in a new suit he'd ordered from Santa Fe, looked handsome enough to take her breath away. When he offered his arm to escort her to the wagon, Martha felt a surge of pride that this man had chosen her. The Parker home was ablaze with light, decorated lavishly for the season. As Martha and Ian entered, conversation dimmed momentarily before resuming with increased intensity. Martha held her head high, refusing to be intimidated. Evelyn Parker approached, her smile tight but her manners impeccable. "Martha, Mr. Zimmerman, how lovely that you could join us." "Thank you for inviting us," Martha replied politely. "Your home looks beautiful." "Yes. Well, Christmas deserves proper celebration," Evelyn said, her gaze sweeping over Martha's dress with barely concealed surprise. "That gown is quite lovely. I don't believe I've seen it before." "I haven't had much occasion to wear it recently," Martha acknowledged. "Well, you must circulate," Evelyn said briskly. "Frank is eager to continue your discussion about water rights, Mr. Zimmerman." As Evelyn moved away to greet other guests, Ian squeezed Martha's hand reassuringly. "Shall we brave the lion's den together?" Martha smiled up at him. Together. To Martha's surprise, the evening proved more enjoyable than she had anticipated. Frank Parker introduced Ian to several influential ranchers, all of whom expressed interest in the irrigation system. Martha found herself engaged in conversation with their wives, who seemed to have developed a newfound respect for the widow who had defied expectations. Even Patrick Thorne, who attended with his wife, maintained a civil distance, though his eyes followed Martha and Ian with undisguised resentment. As the evening drew to a close, Frank Parker called for attention. "Friends, before we part ways, I'd like to propose a toast. To new beginnings and prosperous partnerships." He raised his glass in Martha and Ian's direction. "May the coming year bring abundance to our entire valley." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering as glasses were raised. Martha felt Ian's arm slip around her waist, a public acknowledgement of their relationship that both thrilled and terrified her. On the drive home, snow began to fall, large, lazy flakes that transformed the landscape into something magical. "They've accepted us," Martha said wonderingly. "Or at least, they've accepted that we're not going away." "People respect success," Ian said simply, "and what we're building will bring prosperity to the whole region." "Self-interest is a powerful motivator," Martha laughed. "That's rather cynical." "Practical," Ian corrected with a smile, "like someone else I know." When they reached the ranch, Ian helped Martha down from the wagon, but instead of leading her toward the house, he took her hand and guided her toward the barn. "What are you doing?" Martha asked, confused. "It's freezing out here." "Just trust me," Ian said, his eyes twinkling with a secret. "I have something to show you." The barn was warm and dimly lit by a single lantern. Ian led Martha to the far corner where something large stood covered by a tarp. "Merry Christmas," he said, pulling the covering away to reveal an apple sapling in a large pot, its slender trunk tied to a supporting stake. Martha gasped. "An apple tree? But how?" "I wrote to that California expert I mentioned," Ian explained. "This is a special variety he's developed, Golden Sunrise. It produces sweet golden apples and is hardy enough for our climate." He took Martha's hands in his. "I thought we could plant it on Christmas Day, as a symbol of our future together." Martha felt tears spring to her eyes. "It's perfect." Ian's expression grew more serious. "There's something else." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. "I was going to wait until tomorrow, but—" He knelt on one knee, opening the box to reveal a ring, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. "Martha Thorne, will you marry me?" Martha's heart seemed to stop, then race forward. "Yes," she whispered. Then more firmly, "Yes, Ian, I will marry you." Ian slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left no doubt about his feelings. When they finally broke apart, Martha looked down at the ring on her finger, then at the sapling that represented their future. "People called me dust," she said softly. "Something worthless, something that would blow away." "They were wrong," Ian said, stroking her cheek. "From the moment I met you, I knew you were pure gold. And now, everyone else can see it too." Martha stood on tiptoe to kiss him again, feeling truly happy for the first time in years. "Take me home, Ian. It's time to start our new life together." They were married on New Year's Day, 1876, in a simple ceremony attended by neighbors and newfound friends. Pedro and Elena stood as witnesses, beaming with pleasure as Martha and Ian exchanged vows in the small church in Copper Creek. Even Evelyn Parker made a point of congratulating them warmly, while Frank discussed plans for sharing water rights that would benefit both their properties. Patrick Thorne was noticeably absent, having announced his intention to sell his holdings and move to California. Martha couldn't find it in her heart to be sorry. As Martha and Ian rode home as husband and wife, the winter sun broke through the clouds, bathing the landscape in golden light. The apple sapling they had planted on Christmas Day stood protected in its special enclosure, waiting for spring to put down deeper roots. "What are you thinking?" Ian asked, noticing Martha's contemplative expression. She smiled, looking out over the ranch that had once been her burden and was now her joy. "I'm thinking that sometimes the things people dismiss as worthless turn out to be the most valuable of all." Ian reached across to take her hand, the gold of her wedding band catching the light. "Pure gold," he agreed, "and growing more precious every day." Spring arrived with gentle rains that filled the irrigation channels, bringing new life to fields that had lain dormant for too long. Martha and Ian worked side by side, planting the orchard on the eastern slope 50 saplings to start, with plans for more in the coming years. The golden sunrise apple tree they had planted at Christmas grew stronger, putting out new leaves and even a few blossoms that promised future fruit. Martha often stood before it in the evenings, marveling at how much had changed in a single year. The ranch flourished under their joint care. They hired more workers, built a new barn, and even began construction on an addition to the house, a nursery for the child Martha now carried beneath her heart. When summer came, bringing with it long golden days and star-filled nights, Martha and Ian sat on their porch swing, watching fireflies dance above the fields they had restored together. "Are you happy?" Ian asked, his hand resting gently on her growing belly. Martha leaned against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "No regrets?" he pressed. "About staying here when everyone said you should leave?" Martha shook her head. "Not one. This is where I belong. With you, with our land." with our future. She placed her hand over his. They called me dust, but you saw gold. I still do, Ian said, kissing her tenderly. Every day, more clearly than the last. As darkness fell completely, they remained on the porch, talking of their plans, their dreams, their child soon to come. The ranch around them, once struggling to survive, now thrived with new purpose and promise. And if anyone in Copper Creek still remembered when the widow Thorne was called dust, they kept it to themselves. For it was plain to see that in the hands of the man who loved her, she had indeed proven to be pure gold.